Welcome back. In this lecture, we are going to understand about Terraform resource meta argument named depends on. So this slide is going to be a theoretical slide with very good information about the depends on meta argument. So whenever you want to reference the information about resource meta argument, so you can directly refer this slide when you are planning to do your certification or anything. So accordingly, the number of slides are provided for each topic for easy reference. Okay, so you can even call them as easy reference cards. Quickly you can reference them before your certification exam. So with that said, so using the depends on meta argument to handle hidden resource or module dependencies that Terraform can't automatically infer. So explicitly specifying a dependency means like using the depends on meta argument is necessary only when a resource or module relies on some other resource's behavior. Maybe that resource need to be created before this resource, but doesn't access any of that resource's data in its arguments. So let's take resource A and then resource B, right? So in resource B, you are adding that meta argument depends on and saying that resource B is dependent on resource A. So you are saying explicitly that resource B creation will be dependent on resource A. If only resource A is created, then only I can create the resource B. So in that case, in resource B, okay, so you really means like resource B doesn't need to be relied on any of the arguments inside resource A. It only need to focus on whether resource A is created or not. In that case, you can explicitly use this depends on meta argument. So this argument can be used in both resources and also in the module blocks. So the depends on meta argument, if present, must be a list of references to other resources or child modules in the same calling module. So you are in the root module and then you are trying to call a resource inside the same root module or a child modules whatever you have defined. So it cannot be from another module whatever is outside of this respective root module. So arbitrary expressions are not allowed in the depends on argument value. So this is another important point. So whenever you are calling another module as a explicit dependency here, okay, another resource or module, right? So it should be a direct reference to that respective resource or module. So no arbitrary expression replacements are allowed here. Okay, why? Because its value must be known before Terraform knows resource relationships, and thus before it can safely evaluate the expressions. And finally, the depends on argument should be used only as a last resort. Add comments for future references about why we added this depends on meta argument in your resource. Okay, so these are the important points about the depends on meta argument. Okay, moving on. So what is our use case and then what are we going to implement to understand better about this depends on meta argument? So you can take a very simple example, resource A and then resource B, and then try it, or take more real-time example, right, and then implement it. So to implement a more real-time example, so you need to do little more amount of work. Okay, so the idea here is we are just learning the depends on meta argument, but the core thing here is during the process you will learn the creation of a VPC, how to create a AWS VPC using Terraform and its underlying resources, means like creating subnets, internet gateway, creating route table, and then creating route in route table for internet access, and associate the route table with the subnet, and also create a security group, right? So all these come under the VPC resources whatever we create. Then we'll move on to create a EC2 instance and also provide some user data information inside that to deploy a sample app like a Apache web server, and also update some index.html with some custom text. Okay, so these are the resources we create. And finally, we create a elastic IP and then assign that elastic IP to this respective EC2 instance. But so there will be a explicit dependency for elastic IP, okay, which is nothing but EIP may require internet gateway to be existed prior to association, okay. So the explicit dependency for elastic IP is it need to have the VPC internet gateway available so that it will be able to create the elastic IP and then associate, okay. So with that said, we are going to test the meta argument depends on and also learn by creating all these resources, okay. Close to 9 resources we are going to create step by step and then learn them, okay. So let's go back to our GitHub repository, and if you see in our HashiCorp certified Terraform associate GitHub repository in 04 Terraform resources, so you have a section called 0402 meta argument depends on, okay. So here in the introductory part also it is given very clearly that so you will create 9 AWS resources in a step-by-step manner. So you'll create the Terraform block, provider block, and 9 resource blocks, okay. So there is another thing to be mentioned here is whatever you create these first 6 of the VPC related core resources, right? So when we move on to the modules section of this course, so when you move to this modules section of this course and then when you learn the modules, right, so it is going to be super simple. Once you learn the modules, you just call the VPC module and then provide the input parameters and then all things will get created easily. But so for learning purpose, it is always good to learn more amount of resources, how to create and then how we are going to create and then how we are going to call one resource inside another resource and then replace the expressions. All those things you can learn when you create more amount of resources. So with that said, it is going to be simplified when we go to modules. Even then, we are going to do it in a resource approach here so that we learn more concept effectively. So in that line, so I am going to create these 9 resources and then learn the meta argument depends on argument, and also in addition to that, creating all these resources and then have more hands-on for ourselves, okay. So I'll see you in the next lecture and to move on with the step 2 for the section, okay. So where is it? So here it is, okay. So from step 2 onwards, we'll focus on creating from the next lecture. Until then, bye bye. Thank you.